way that was all handled is probably partly why I don't always have fond memories of that England team. I don't think they handled Peterson very well. I know he was difficult at times, and all that sort of stuff. Some of it was so childish. And I remember saying to Embers after the game, John, I just need to get a comment, for the paper. And he just looked at me and he said, well, anything I can say is I'm fucked. We were in Pakistan. This is before 9/11, and we went to Peshawar, which is right up in the northwestern frontier. And our fixers, our guides, took us on a day trip up the Khyber Pass. Still got photos of that. And we went right to the border with Afghanistan. We went past this Bin Laden's house. I mean, this is with the England team as well. They're with us. Don't let your own personal opinions cloud your reporting. I think there's a lot of reporting now that is opinion based rather than factual based.
I remember Peterson landing at Heathrow because he'd been away in South Africa or something, and all these photographers were there, and I thought, "Oh, I
Um,
caught that."
let's take it back, Nick. So, in terms of growing up, for you, what were your like earliest cricket memories?
I grew up in Northampton and I used to go to this county ground. I called it Wantage Road in print recently. Comments below the line, obviously, fellow Northamptonians told me off for calling it Wantage Road because it's known as the county ground. But yeah, I used to go there my school holidays with my schoolmates, Mark and Barry, and Mark and Lee, and we would go there and spend our school holidays there. And safeguarding wasn't what it is now, I guess. But that would be what we would do. We'd watch Northants play all summer, and those are my earliest memories watching Wayne Larkins, Jeff Cook, David Capel, Rob Bailey, people like that play for Northants. I mean, I never, do you know what? I didn't go to a test match until I was a journalist. And in fact, I've never been to a test match other than as a journalist. I've never sat in I've only ever sat in the press box. We didn't really do that when I was a kid. Didn't go to test grounds. So yeah, those are my earliest memories. Earliest Ashes memory actually, I think was listening to the radio in bed, listening to the MCG Boxing Day Test match, and I think it would have been probably Gatting's tour. I remember listening to that so Christmas night, Boxing Day morning on the radio, and thinking, oh, I'd love to go there one day. I still pinch myself when I go there on Boxing Day. I never thought I'd ever go on an Ashes tour. I never thought I'd ever see cricket around the world. So yeah, I don't believe me, I don't take that for granted.
No, that's great to hear. And what about? I know you just said that you didn't go to any test matches until you become a journalist. But what about when you mentioned watching Northampton? But what about England? Any early memories of watching England? And it's been a sort of a little bit before my time, but 80s was a bit mixed, and that 90s period has been spoken about, but really underachieved. Like, what did you make of England over that time?
Well, they're just great characters, weren't they? I mean, I remember, as a kid, Ian Botham was a massive figure. People say, if somebody says to me, who's the most famous cricketer in the country in 2025, I would still say Ian Botham. If you stop people in the street and ask them, they'll probably say Beefy. That might be Stokes has probably pushed him now, but Jeffrey Boycott. I mean, those are the names that still resonate now, Gower, because it was on free to air TV, and we used to come home, turn the TV on, and watch those games. I remember the '85 Ashes, England winning. I was obviously the Northants. Alan Lamb was obviously the player that was the one that I always looked out for because he was the only Northants player ever in the England team. And so yeah, I remember the 1990 tour to the West Indies because there were four Northants players in that. And I remember we were at school when they announced the squad, and me and my mates couldn't believe there were four Northants players going on an England tour to the Caribbean. So Wayne Larkins, Rob Bailey, David Capel, and obviously Alan Lamb. So yeah, those are the sort of memories. I don't remember heading it. I don't remember 81. That's too far back. So the sort of 85 Ashes was the first one I would really remember. And then the mid 90s, I kind of switched off from cricket really because of starting as a journalist career. And then it was only when I really started moving into cricket that it switched back on again.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you're currently the chief cricket correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, and was a cricket writer before then. what was your well, actually, even before we get into that, like, did you always want to become a journalist? Did you always want to get into cricket journalism?
I didn't want to get into cricket journalism. No, I didn't really know that you could do that. I suppose I always wanted to be a journalist. That is, I've been lucky that from a young age I knew what I wanted to do, and I went on work experience at a local paper when I was at school. My dad, I grew up with my dad in a single parent family, and he loved sport and he loved newspapers. We'd have the paper in the morning and then the local paper in the evening and the Pink 'Un on a Saturday, and he'd take me to football on a Saturday in the winter. We go and watch Northampton, and then in the summer to Northampton. So those two sort of things have sort of shaped, I guess, my career really. That and newspapers and sport, I remember the local, now defunct free paper, The Citizen, putting a thing out saying, send us your match report from Northampton Town. I must have been about 14 at the time. And I remember handwriting a little match report, and it got published, and then, yeah, so that was so that, but you still didn't really know how that would come about. I mean, I had nobody in the family who had done media, and had really any idea of how you got to become a reporter. And um, I was working. I stayed at home for university. I went to, well, it wasn't university then, but I went to Nen College, which is now Northampton University, and I didn't do journalism. But I remember there being an advert in the Chronicle and Echo for a trainee reporter, and I applied for the job, and obviously I didn't get anywhere. Um, and I then wrote a letter to every single local paper in the country, daily local paper in the country, asking for an interview for any opportunities. And I didn't get a single reply. But then, like I said, this advert appeared in the Northampton Chronicle and Echo, and I didn't get. But at the time, I was working. I had a Saturday job, a weekend job in Marks and Spencer's in the town centre, and there was a robbery, and nothing appeared in the local paper. So I said to my dad, "Should I let the paper know?" And he dug out a typewriter, and I did it, and he took me around to the office, and I posted it through the letterbox on the Sunday morning or whatever, and then Monday I got a phone call inviting me in for an interview. Um, and I can date my job interview because it was the day of the Oklahoma bombings in America. So I've only got to go on Wikipedia to find out the date when I was interviewed for my first job in journalism. And there was 12 of us in a room, the Chronicle and Echo, interviewed by the editor, the deputy editor, and the news editor. We had a group interview, and then we split off into to be interviewed by one of the senior people, and I was interviewed by the deputy editor. His name's Mark Edwards, and he liked me and he put me forward for the job, but I didn't get it. It went to somebody else. Uh, but luck, I mean, this is how luck plays a part. Within a few weeks, the editor had moved on, and Mark, the deputy, became editor, and he remembered me, and I got a call saying, "Do you want to come in for some work experience?" And I never left.
That's brilliant. And the amount of journalists that I've spoke to over the years, or that read interviews or watch interviews where luck plays so much of a part. Like players, like luck plays a part, and I think saying yes is a very underrated thing, which some people still don't do. So what did you learn like as a young journalist? Sort of a trainee journalist. That's what is it you've learned, like traits wise, or learnings over the years that you still hold to this day?
Um, I'm still learning. I know that's a cliche, but I am. I mean, the job's changed so much in the last few years that I'm still trying to work out how to do it. I suppose the one thing I was always, I wasn't the most talented writer. I wasn't the most, I didn't play cricket for England. So I had to sort of work out how I could make myself useful. And so I'd rely on my reporting skills and hard work. And I thought I can work harder than anyone else. And I can, I had a grounding in news reporting as a trainee reporter on my local paper, and also grounding covering cricket. I covered cricket for the local paper for 3 summers. And that taught me the real basics, which were covering one team, Northamptonshire, um, building up contacts, which involves developing trust with people and getting on with people. Um, and I made a few mistakes along the way, but I'm glad I made those mistakes then. But it didn't, rather than when I was covering England, it could be more serious. Um, and and those skills then that I learned then are still what I employ today. It's what's a story, what's going to interest the readers, what if you have an idea, pursue it. Try and get on with as many people as you can. Don't let your own personal opinions cloud your reporting. I think there's a lot of reporting now that is opinion based rather than factual based, because people mold the facts to fit their opinion. Just try and leave that at the front door if you can. Uh, so those are the skills. But most importantly was probably learning to, like I say, to get on with people and try and build contacts. And some of the people I covered back then are still contacts now. And and like I say, I got lucky with some lucky breaks. But I think the other thing I learned was to, when you get an opportunity, to grab it and don't say no, just say yes and do it. And if you don't, somebody else will do it. So, it's that kind of industry. If you get an opportunity, take it.
No, yeah, completely. And yeah, some really good advice. And you mentioned you covered, Northampton for 3 seasons. So how did that come about in terms of, did you express an interest in, I want to cover cricket, or did it, like you sort of said, did an opportunity come up? How did that all start basically?
But both really. I had a 6 month training scheme at the Chronicle and Echo, and where we went away to college in Peterborough actually, and we learned shorthand and government law and media law and all those sort of things. We were given a patch to cover, and it was kind of like a good, give you grounding training experience. And because we were being paid to go there by a newspaper, and the newspaper was paying for our training course, it was pretty strict. I mean, it was a job. It wasn't like a university course. If you didn't turn up for a lecture one day, that'd be on you. We were regimented, and that was brilliant discipline to learn. And I went back to the paper and I did 6 months as a general news reporter, council meetings, all that sort of stuff. But I knew the guys on the sports desk, and that I made no sort of secret of my love of sport and wanted to to not necessarily to cover it. I never really wanted to be a sports journalist. I think my original plan was I'd like to be a cover politics. And I don't think being a lobby correspondent is probably not that different to covering sport in the sense of having to get on with people and build contacts and stuff. Um, but a job came up on sport. Guy was leaving. It was offered to me, and I took it. And then very quickly after, again, like I say, these things come along. The guy who was covering the cricket team fell ill, and they sent me to cover a few games. I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, but they stuck with me, and yeah, I ended up going home and away with Northants for 3 years. I mean, incredible now. I don't think local papers even send anyone to cricket matches in their own backyard now, but I was sent all over the country to cover them. Championship, first class, count, all of it. And so yeah, that was it. But I never thought I want to be, I want to be Neville Cardus, or I want to be I want to be CMJ and become a cricket correspondent. It was really never really something I thought of. My initial aim was I want to be a national newspaper journalist, and I just assumed that would be as a news reporter.
No, great stuff. And what was it like covering, Northampton at that time? Because, the county championship is still a strong competition. I think people knock it way too much. I think it's totally unfair. But in that period, obviously, you had, I think, more overseas players. You had obviously less. There was no T20 in that era. No,
No,
no
no,
hundred. So the red ball
no. It'd
cricket,
be
you had the overseas player that would play for the whole, or maybe a couple
yeah,
players for the whole season, rather than just maybe three or four nowadays.
yeah. No, I mean yeah, it's changed completely. I mean, B&H was a massive competition, the NatWest Trophy. Those were the sort of big especially for a team like Northampton, really never were going to challenge for the championship that much. Overseas player, my first one I really got to know and got well with was Matthew Hayden, which I'll see him in Australia this winter. That's something that's endured. The first championship match I covered was at the Oval, and it was Graham Swan's first class debut. And Swanee and I, we still talk, I still interview Swanee from time to time. We're still share, chat, and so that's what I mean about these sort of people you get to know, the enduring. But no, it was great fun. I loved it. I mean, I look back on it and think, what a great time that was. The things I learned and um, and to get close to a team, professional team at that sort of stage of your career was invaluable, really. And yeah, I wouldn't, I was very lucky.
Totally.
Cricket
And
wasn't great though. They didn't get anywhere. They were never threatened to win anything.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna I was gonna ask
they were
how did they
pretty
do?
they were pretty hopeless. I remember they played a game. The lowest point was when John Embry. I love Ember's great bloke, but he was he was a director of cricket, and we got they set Leicestershire 200 to win off 20 overs. Like, and this is pre T20, right? So it was never going to happen. No, it was going to be a draw, and they knocked it off with ease, with ease. And I remember saying to Embers after the game, John, I just need to get a comment, for the paper. And he just looked at me and he said, "Well, anything I can say is I'm fucked." And he, because he knew he was going to get sacked, and that was it. So, that was. I remember went through a few captains and a few coaches.
um, just in terms of it might be different now, but certainly back then, Nick. In terms of covering cricket, especially like 4 day games and stuff like that. Are you just on your own? Do you have to do the press afterwards? You have to cover like a whole match. It's unlike football where like you've got 90 minutes. It's quite easy to sum up a 90-minute game in say 500 words. With a match day, a test match day, or a 50 over match, whatever it is, or even just a day of red ball cricket, first class cricket. How difficult is it to sum up in especially newspapers then, obviously with word count, etc. It's a bit easy with online now, with don't have to worry so much about word count, but particularly then, and timings as well with 11 p.m. deadlines and stuff like that. How difficult is that, especially to do it by yourself?
You mean then or now?
Both actually. That'd be interesting to
Both,
hear.
yeah.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
then it was. I didn't really think about it in those days. I just did it. I mean, it was very quote heavy then in the local paper. They weren't looking for particularly gilded writing. Now it's different, very different. I would because I'm not on my own. I've got two colleagues generally writing on the same day's play, so you have to come up with your own take on the day. So I'm the match reporter, I guess you would say in old money. But if you read a match report from the EW Swanson in the 60s, it will be very different to what we do now. We don't really bother with run of play anymore. I always say the top third is kind of a comment, the middle third is analysis, and the last bit is, well, probably less than a third these days, is just tell people what happened. You do have an element of how to describe what happened. Um, I just think, what is the story of the day? What is the if you're gonna what is the line today? What is the story of the overall day? And I still get that wrong. I still, it's not always easy. The one thing this England team are very good at about is making you look an absolute mug, because they can win from nowhere. The worst one I've had was day one in Hyderabad, last England tour to India, and Tom Hartley got smacked everywhere, if you remember. And they hadn't had any warm-up cricket. And I come up with this line in there that undercooked and over-promoted, as in Hartley was over-promoted and they were undercooked. And they grabbed that and they stuck it in the headline on the front page of the sports section. And of course, 3 days later, Tom Hartley gets a 7 for England win and go 1-0 up. And you just think, I've done it again. I've done it again. I've gone early. I've gone early. But like I said, I just read Richard Whitehead's book on the Len Hutton's tour, and quite a lot of that is about the newspaper coverage, which I found quite fascinating. And guys there were doing the same thing as 70 years ago. So, getting, going early with their judgments. I mean, we're under pressure to do that. Particularly these days, you're under pressure to make statements and you can't rely on just, writing 700 words on every cover drive that Joe Root hit. You got to put an opinion out there. And sometimes cricket is a game that makes you look an idiot. You're the equivalent, I guess, is a football guy having to write his match report based on 20 minutes of action. When I'm filing on day one or day two, it's going to be completely different day five. It's a bugger of a sport for that, but that is endlessly challenging, and that's the best bit about it.
Yeah, well, that's why we love cricket, mate. Like it's never, especially under. It's been great watching this era under McCullum and Stokes. It's totally fascinating, and as a fan, I'm sure you as a journalist, you don't know what's going to happen in a good way, like what's going to happen the next day.
No, and the other thing you have I mean, you still get it a little bit. The time difference can be particularly when you're overseas, that ahead of the curve. So anywhere other than the Caribbean, you're going to be ahead of the clock, ahead of London. So that is another challenge. It's changed a bit because obviously previously the most important thing was print, and so when I was in Australia in the predominantly print days, you can never ever throw your piece forward. You can only look back because by the time the paper comes out and people have read your piece, it'll already be a day out of date because you'd already another day's play. So you could never say, throw it at full. You always had to reflect. That has probably changed a bit now because the majority of the focus is digital, and my piece will go up online this winter 7 a.m. or whatever, whenever it is, and that will be the most important bit of that work that I do for digital, and I'll be judged on that piece rather than what's in the paper. So that is just something that you have to take into account when you're doing overseas tours, and the propensity for this England team to pull something out of the hat and make you look an idiot.
No, no, completely. Okay, so Nick, you spoke earlier about you covered Northamptonshire for 3 seasons. So what happened, after then? Did you join the Telegraph straight away? Was there a gap in
No,
between?
no, I didn't. Oh, I got offered. It was right at the start of the kind of .com sort of boom, and I got approached for a job with Channel 4.com. They'd got the cricket rights, and they offered me a job. I took it. It was obviously London based, and um, I got offered two jobs on the same day. It was one of those sort of crossroads moments. I got offered a job at Hayter's Sports Agency, which kind of a finishing school in those days, probably still is for sports journalists. A lot of the big names, Martin Samuel and guys like that, all went through Hayter's. I got offered a job by them and cover Fulham. And then I got offered a job by this cricket website, which was, who knows which one's going to last longer. So I went for the cricket job because they offered to send me on cricket tours. That winter, England were going to Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and the NASA, and they said we'll send you. So it was a no-brainer, really. I'd never been outside Europe before. I'd only ever been to Ibiza on holiday. I'd never been anywhere, so it was all a bit odd for me. And there I was on my first cricket tour in Pakistan, 2000. Yeah, so I did that for a couple of years. Then I got made redundant because things didn't work out, and I freelanced for a few years. But because I'd had that grounding, because I'd had that one winter touring, I'd built up mates in the press box and a few contacts. And the following year, in between sort of doing subbing shifts at the Telegraph, the Guardian, and all football matches for a few people, I then paid my own way as a freelance to go to New Zealand on the tour, the England tour. And that's when I first worked for the Telegraph. Actually, I picked up the first piece for them because they were between cricket correspondents at the time. CMJ had gone back to the Times, and Derek Pringle hadn't yet come in as cricket correspondent. So I picked up quite a lot of work on that trip for the Telegraph, working with Martin Johnson, absolute legend, and then. And then the following winter, I went to Australia on the 2002-3 Ashes in the same sort of position. I paid my own way out there, but I got gigs with the Sunday People and the Daily Sport. I did them every day. They would pay 50 quid a day. So that would basically pay for all my accommodation. And they were great. They were brilliant to deal with. Very professional, actually. Get told off for spelling names wrong, whatever. And that gave me a base for the whole tour. And then I picked up. I was doing sort of deputy number two's job for the Guardian. Uh, Stuff for the Telegraph. I did Wisden, did the Evening Standard. I did loads. Anything I could to pay my way. Um, and then after that, I got a job at the Wisden Cricketer magazine when it set up. When I didn't really like that though. I wasn't really cut out for monthly magazine work, so I decided to jack that in and went freelance and worked mainly at the Telegraph, and I mainly did subbing shifts actually. And they 2005 they offered me a job as a staff on staff as a sub, and yeah, I had one last freelance gig. Went to the Torino Winter Olympics, bizarrely, and then I started at the Telegraph, March 2006 as a sub, and I've been on staff ever since.
Great stuff. I mean, I remember you did a preview with Nasser saying Michael Atherton, not on the last Pakistan tour, the one before, and you were on
Yeah.
the Sky Cricket pod, and all of you obviously spoke about your memories covering England on that Pakistan trip in 2000. It was maybe the first two-thirds of that tour were pretty non-eventful with the flattest pitches ever, probably, and high scores and ball draws, especially in that particular era. And then obviously England famously won in the dark. And there's that famous story of I can't remember the journalist's name, but someone filed their copy and thinking that's the most boring series ever, and then England end up somehow winning.
That was Michael Henderson. It was a Telegraph. He launched into Atherton. They were great mates, so it was all a bit tongue in cheek. What a boring innings he played, which it was. And yeah, of course, got letters galore from the readers. Yeah, that was my first day on my first cricket tour. I got a call saying my granddad had died, so I then went back home to his funeral, and then came back. And yeah, I mean, it was just a culture shock for me, and amazing to experience that. We were in Pakistan. This is before 9/11, and we went to Peshawar, which is right up in the northwestern frontier. And our fixers, our guides, took us on a day trip up the Khyber Pass. Still got photos of that. And we went right to the border with Afghanistan. We went past Bin Laden's house. I mean, this is with the England team as well. They were with us, I posed for a photograph holding an AK-47. I mean, there were blocks of hashish everywhere. And we were there with the England team. It's mind-boggling, really. Never happen again. That's my main memory of that tour, really. The test match in Karachi, I was desperate to go home by then. It was a very long trip. I mean, tours used to be so much longer because you'd have one day cricket and then the test series. Um, and That test match, people say to me, how dark was it in Karachi? Well, I'll give you an idea of how dark it was. Is that it was during Ramadan, and all the local journalists had missed the end of the test because they were breaking their fast out in the press dining lounge behind the press box because it was dark. It was nighttime. Um, and they should never have been playing. I mean, it was a farce, really. And Buckner only did it because he didn't like the Pakistan team, and outrageous, really. It'd have been the other way around. We'd have been ranting about it 30 years later. But England showed a lot of they were expected to lose 3-0 in that series, and to get away with a 0-0 draw would have been enough for them. And Nasser was an amazing captain to deal with. I mean, he was quite frightening, especially for a young reporter. But he gave brilliant quotes. I mean, just some of his press conferences are incredible. I saw him the following year. The thing I'll never forget about Nasser was the way he fronted up after Ben Hollioake died that day when we were in Wellington. I mean, he spoke so lucidly from the heart. Yeah, so but that Pakistan tour was character forming, and I love going to Pakistan and India. It's some of the I always remember those trips. You don't necessarily remember the one day series in the Caribbean, UAE, but you do remember those ones in that part of the world.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, what was it like? Because you're 1 year you're covering, or for 3 years you're covering Northampton. Next thing you know, you're in Pakistan covering England, the national team, and you're in the press area with other former players and things like that. Like and obviously you're not just focused on a local county team. You're focused on the national team, and then England are an institution in Test cricket and cricket in general. So how, I mean, it's just so different, isn't it?
Yeah, it was daunting. I know that. I've got I mean, there were guys who made me feel very welcome in the press box. Pat Murphy was one, Miles Hodgson, who was then the Press Association cricket correspondent, Mike Walters, who was only just recently left the Mirror. Guys who really looked after me on that tour, and I'm very grateful for that. Um, I suppose I was very shy. I mean, I was shy. I didn't have a lot of confidence. I probably didn't ask a single question on that tour. I was too scared to. But yeah, it was hugely eye-opening. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. And uh, on those early tours, I was just enjoying being there, really.
Yeah, it's a good attitude to have for sure. So you end up at the Telegraph, full time, as you say. I know the answer to this, but like, there was no such thing as a typical day and week. I suppose that's the great thing about journalism, cricket journalism, especially nowadays, where there's cricket on all the time. So, how does your role split in terms of like you're the chief, cricket correspondent. So obviously you're reporting on what's happening. So what's your how do you split your time in terms of reporting, writing about what's happening and building up your contacts, and then interviewing people and like does it? Oh, I imagine it varies obviously all the time.
Well, the job has changed. I mean, the job has since the rise of digital in and the sort of slide of print. It has you used to you don't have the same sort of constraints about filling particular spaces in the paper. So the job has changed, and my job has changed. The job title has changed to in the last few years. Before that, I was the cricket news guy. So cricket news guy, you're always on the phone making calls, trying to get stories, get exclusives. I was doing a lot of ghosting. I was ghosting Vaughan, Jeffrey, Boycott, Shane Warne. All these KP. That was a big part of the job. Um, and now I still look after Boyks because we've been working together for many years. And I love doing it with him. He's great. And with Vorney as well. I split that with my colleague Will. Will McPherson's sort of doing the job I did for most of my time at the Telegraph. Now I guess my job is a lot more, I don't write as many pieces, which I find quite challenging sometimes, but because I'm used to writing a lot, but it's I'm now given time to work on bigger pieces, bigger features, bigger interviews, and they're great. I love doing that. I'm very grateful I've got that opportunity to do that. Go off diary a lot more than we used to. So yeah, there is no real. I can't. It's an impossible job to sort of describe to people who are not in it because it's weird. It just is. There's a lot of intensity around events. So the test summer, the test tours, you work. I'm going to Australia for 66 days. I'll work every day of that 66 days. They'll be very intense. So, but it's been quite low key over the last couple of months because cricket's not been on and it's not quite it's not been, so I've not been at games. But the match days are probably more intense than they used to be. I think digital, the focus is on the live blogging and reacting quickly. You want, if Zach Crawley gets 100 before lunch on day one, we'll be writing pieces on that. Now, previous tours, you wouldn't have picked up your pen until an hour before the end of play, because you didn't have that. My first Ashes tour, that would, I mean, the guys then would never have contemplated that. I think my generation of journalists, I was thinking about this this morning, my generation of journalists have seen more change than any previous generation because of the way digital has overtaken everything. And that's good. I mean, it's exciting, it's different. We're doing a lot more sort of off platform stuff to the, podcasts and to video, and it's a good challenge. It's great to be doing that sort of those different things. But yeah, there's no typical one day really.
No, of course. Well, it makes things interesting, doesn't it? I think any job you want to be challenged and not do the same thing every day. You get bored senseless after a while, wouldn't you? So in terms of England, obviously, when you started, you're covering cricket again. You've come into a pretty good era. You're covering England with a couple of fallow years with the Kevin Pietersen's captaincy, the debacle in West Indies. But after then, for the next sort of 3 years or so, you covered probably England's greatest ever, or so one of England's greatest ever Test teams against number one in the world. What was it like covering around that period? Obviously, that covers that, or that includes the 2010-11 last Ashes series. But we just absolutely dominated all the teams in that period.
Yeah, I found them a pretty dull team to cover, actually. I didn't think they were that exciting. I mean, they were a winning machine for a period, but they weren't always the easiest team to get on with. And I probably enjoyed it more later years, really, covering England. 2011, I guess I probably didn't appreciate it at the time. It was my second Ashes tour, and I thought they're all like this. You go to Australia and you win three games by an innings. So everybody banging on about. Um, and when I'd seen them win a Test match since. So I probably didn't appreciate that at the time. Um, but I mean, there were some great characters. Peterson was a fascinating cricketer to cover. Brilliant to watch, divisive, everything you want, really. Great quote him. That innings in Mumbai, something I'll never forget. It was a fascinating time. Andy Flowers, another fascinating bloke. He could be difficult, but I've got a lot of time for Andy. He wore his heart on his sleeve. But they just were a bit, I don't know, the cricket wasn't that exciting a lot of the time. They
You scored at 2.5 and over.
yeah, and it was a bowl dry. It was all very, it was efficient winning machines, but not. I mean, Swanee was great. Obviously, a lot of flair and gave it a rip and was great, character. But yeah, they could be. He could. I don't know. It's not that I would say, despite on paper the results are amazing. It's probably I'd much prefer covering and watching this team, even though they don't win as many games.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Certainly, I much prefer 5 and over than 2.5 and over run rates anyway. So obviously that period, before the debacle of 13-14, that summer of 2012 was legendary for sort of different reasons, really. I mean, South Africa beat England 2-0 to, take the number one spot from us, but that's sort of second fiddle compared to what happened that summer with, Textgate with Kevin Pietersen and amongst the other things that happened that summer. I mean, and I think that probably the first summer, or maybe the spot fixing in 2010 with the Pakistan no balls and stuff, but maybe that one in Textgate in 2012 as well was when social media was really started to come to the fore in the news space, because we're talking about BBM BlackBerry messages being the heart
Yes,
of
remember
a
those?
of a bit that's been the heart of a story involving obviously the England cricket team.
I don't know. You'd explain BlackBerry messages to my kids now. I don't. I don't even know what a BlackBerry is, but I was actually covering during the height of that. I wasn't covering cricket. I was covering the 2012 Olympics because I live in East London. The Olympic Stadium is about a 10-minute walk from my house. So I was very keen to get involved in the Olympic coverage, and we thought, well, it's only a tour against South Africa. It's not an Ashes tour, so you can go off and do that. It was fine. And I was in the Olympic Media Centre that Saturday when it all kicked off at Headingley. I had for two reasons I thought I was in the wrong place. I was in the wrong place because one, my job at the Olympics that day was to cover Michael Phelps's last race. Turned out not to be his last race as well. Whilst everything was going on in the stadium next door where they were winning three gold medals and I could hear all the cheering. I thought I'm in the wrong place here. I then thought I'm actually in the wrong place overall because I should be at Headingley while all this crap's kicking off with KP. It's tough being me and all that sort of stuff. Um, and it was, I mean, partly why I kind of never, that's the way that was all handled, is probably partly why I don't always have fond memories of that England team. I don't think they handled Peterson very well. I know he was difficult at times, and all that sort of stuff. Some of it was so childish, and you just wanted a grown up in the room to bang some heads together and sort this out. You remember you had that bullying Twitter account that was KP, can't remember what it was called
KP
now.
Genius.
Yeah, and all that sort of just, I mean, what was going on with that? It just, you just think, and I think, what he actually texted, he wasn't sending them data on how to get Andrew Strauss out. It was like, he doesn't like it when you go around the wicket to him. I mean, yeah, obviously, because he was all over the place. It was, yeah, it was an incredible story and summed up really where that team were going. I mean, it's amazing that they won the 2013 Ashes when you think about it, because they did recover, didn't they? They did recover their equilibrium to one last rodeo, and then of course it all fell apart again in Australia as soon as any pressure was exerted on them, the cracks, opened up.
Yeah, no,
And I was
totally.
on that tour, and it was, yeah, it was by the end, it was an absolute, it was a complete mess.
Yeah, well, I think that's an understatement. I'm about to bring that up actually, Nick. So, did you? Obviously, I know we won in 2013, but I think the scoreline flattered England. I've got to say that first test was it Trent Bridge we won. That was quite a close game. That could have gone
Yeah,
to
it was a good
Australia.
game. That was one of the great tests. Yeah, yeah. No, England deserved to win. I mean, they were all over them in that series. I mean, they did deserve to win, and but the warning signs were there in that one day series, weren't they? When Johnson came into the team afterwards, and looked like he could
Oh
bowl
yeah.
again.
Mm.
And we'd had a glimpse of that in 10-11 when he bowled like the wind in Perth, and England lost. Um, we had all that stuff at Trent Bridge, didn't we, with Broad and not walking and that lingered over into the next series, and um, Australia started to then really find their kind of mongrel, didn't they, with Warner and Lehman, and it did turn, it did change. You could sense that something was going to happen.
Did you? Sorry to interrupt there, but did you see the 5-0 happening? Like, because I think I could speak
Yeah.
from a fan. You thought it could happen?
Oh yeah, no, well, not 5-0, but I thought this is a team that's exhausted, and it's just too
Yeah.
much. It's just unfair to ask them to go to straight into the cauldron of an Aussie series. And it came very clear once we got out of Brisbane that it was only going to go one way. Trot had gone home, that it was a mess. They were in big trouble. And it was it became a familiar pattern that, from there to the next sort of three tours, two after, sorry, that followed that pattern as well. Yeah, it was one of those. I mean, I had a great time actually. I enjoyed that tour, but yeah, the disintegration of that team happened pretty much overnight, really. Once they left Brisbane, it was fracturing and falling apart.
Yeah. No. So
And you picked up, it wasn't difficult to pick up on that, really.
yeah, cool. So was there? I think Michael Vaughan said about it a number of times about. He mentioned it in the KP documentary that Nasser Hussain did, that brilliant doc that's still on Sky's YouTube now, about like the amount of press briefings about KP in particular. Um, can you remember much about that in particular?
Um, yeah, a little bit. I mean, yeah, there was a bit, yeah, there was a bit of briefing. Um, that's what happens, that's ECB will withdraw in and protect itself. They were pushing an open door with some of my colleagues who some of them just loathed KP. I don't know why, but I just did. So they're pushing a bit of an open door. It was fashionable. It was good copy to bash KP. I always felt that wasn't quite fair. You know, and we then, I mean, my boss at the time pulled a blinder. We then signed KP up as a columnist just after that, and of course we had about 18 months of great stuff from him because it was well that was all will he come back and all will he won't he that kind of thing and and yeah it was it was him giving him his opportunity and his platform to answer some of the pieces that have been written elsewhere.
Yeah, I think
I think
it's
we were as a paper. I guess it was a bit different for us because we had well, we obviously still had Michael Vaughan as a columnist, and he was a lot closer to KP. He got the best out of Peterson, and so he didn't quite swallow a lot of the stuff that was being spoon fed around, and thought, well, maybe you just haven't handled this guy properly.
yeah, no, I completely. Well, Kevin's book is in the corner there. I've nearly finished this. It's fascinating the detail and the amount of injuries that he played through, which wasn't really spoke about during all the furore with what happened with him. Um,
I mean, Kevin, I dealt with Kevin for a while, 4 or 5 years, and he was the polite professional, never any issues. He was a dream to deal with when we had him as a columnist. And yeah, he is what he is. What he can. He was the one. I always felt that he was quite South African in that sense of he didn't always understand English conservatism. He didn't always get that sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut, and he would say things. He'd stab in the belly, not in the back, and that didn't always help him.
yeah, no, no, completely. And do you think I've just thought about another sort of or potential issue. I don't think it's Kevin's fault because he was an outstanding player and way ahead of his time compared to the other England players. Imagine him in Basel now. But like, do you think like the jealousy thing with the IPL? I mean, I think that still was a huge factor in some of the divisions with some certain players. Anyway,
Yeah, it was badly understood, wasn't it, then at the time? And it was a division within the ECB as well. They didn't quite grasp the potential of the IPL. They were worried about ceding power to India, which was happening at the time. Stanford came along, they tried to find their own way out of that problem. And Peterson was a lightning rod for some of that. I mean, he didn't always help himself, obviously, be clear about that, but I think that it was that sort of, a lot of those guys, their only income was ever going to come from their England contracts, and Peterson had this sort of was the first England player to have another option on the table. And he did argue that he's better for my cricket, which I guess in the end was probably most people agree it probably is better for your cricket to play in the IPL. But that wasn't the view. That was something that wasn't really being listened to at the time.
no, no, completely. Um, so obviously post that particular era of the England team, 2019 has got to be one of the in terms of great. We've had the greatest moments probably in English sort of modern history anyway, with that 50 over World Cup win against New Zealand at Lords, and then that Headingley heroics from Ben Stokes. I mean, those two moments, I imagine, as a cricket journalist, really stand out for you.
Yeah, I mean, but I remember getting to the end of the World Cup final and being in a pub afterwards, and my colleague mate Lawrence Booth saying, "Oh, we'll never see that again." And then anything like that, we should make the most of this moment. And then 6 weeks later, it happened again at Headingley with Stokes. I, I I enjoyed that one more. The World Cup final was very stressful, very. It's the only time I've been physically shaking because of various logistical things I had to do. There's a great photo I like from that day of Archer on his knees and Stokes hugging him. And in the background, you can see the clock on the at Lords. And I think it says something like 8:45 or 8:15. I can't remember the exact time. Anyway, I like that because it reminded me of how close we were to deadline.
So I had three jobs that day. One was to write the background story, inside story on how England won a World Cup. Well, I didn't know they were going to win a World Cup until 8 o'clock at night, right? So I had to write an inside story of how England failed to win a World Cup and how England did win a World Cup. My second job was to ghost Michael Vaughan's column on at the end, and the instructions were that if England won the World Cup final, it was going on the front page of the main paper. Now, if you're putting something on the front page of the main paper, it has to be written for the general audience, right? So you can't go into power plays and stuff. You got to be pretty generalistic police piece. But of course, if they lost, it was not going on the front page of the paper. It would have been buried on page 14 of the sports section. Then, of course, it does become a cricket piece. It becomes a piece about how England were unable to adapt their game on slow pitches. That is a cricket piece, it's not a piece of page one. But so that's obviously a different piece you have to write. And the problem with that was that Varney was on air for TMS. They just kept him on. So the column that appeared on the front page of the Telegraph that day, that following day, it was written for him. I just had to make, just this is what he would have said because we just didn't have time. And then I had to do the press conference as well, and the press conference was in the real tennis court, which is the other side of the ground from the media centre. So I had to get round the back of the stands. Can you imagine what state people are in, coming the opposite direction as we're trying to get to the press conference. And in the end, I had to file 10 minutes into the press. Owen with Morgan was still talking when I filed my quotes piece because I didn't have time. I just had to get it over. Because, of course, it took them ages to get there because they had to do all the presentations. Do you know who presented the World Cup that day?
No, I don't.
No, you won't see many photos of that now because it was Prince Andrew. But uh, I think they've all been taken down. So that was whereas the Stokes one at Headingley, it was a Sunday and it happened early in the day, relatively, and I remember sitting at the back of the box in Heading press box at Headingley, and I'd already started writing a piece about, England's batting and how terrible it was or whatever. And then of course we slowly heard the cheers coming and the roars, and we had to rip up and rewrite. But of course it was early, so it was easy to do that. So I enjoyed that one a lot more than I did the World Cup final.
No, absolutely. Um, and then England, we had a really sort of, I know COVID played a part, but the end of Joe Root's captaincy, the quote that keeps getting said all the time is one win in 17. And do you think COVID played a real part in that, or was it literally like we had a captain who'd been there for a while, um, and we just had a team really lacking in confidence and playing maybe the wrong style of play?
Yeah, playing the wrong style of cricket, picked the wrong players, and the um no, they COVID did play its part. I don't think we can not play down that was difficult. And I don't necessarily, I've just been looking this morning, actually looking back through the stuff from the last Ashes tour. And I think we probably at the time didn't really take that into account that much, but I think they'd had 18 tests in COVID conditions before they set foot in Australia. So they were well and truly fed up with it all. But it was just its time it was just something that needed refreshing, it needed a new voice. And they needed to pick players who had the technique and the temperament for Test cricket, and they hadn't done that. There were too many players who weren't quite good enough, and some quirky selections, and a coach who didn't really, in Chris Silverwood, good man, good county coach, good coach for Sri Lanka and stuff. But with England, he was given too much to do. He was selector and he was coach, and yeah, they just they needed a complete reset.
No, no, completely. I mean, Ashley Giles is an '05 player, and that's a really good, really underrated player. But I'm still baffled by that decision. I'll never understand that decision to hand Chris Silverwood the full selection. I've never understood it and never will. So I think that's where probably when that bad selections come into. Okay, Nick. So obviously you've covered a lot of matches for England, and you've achieved a lot in your career. Is there a particular story or a particular interview that stood out? And maybe not, maybe hard to pick one, but is there maybe a few stories that you've covered that you've broken, exclusives, or really good interviews you've done with players or coaches that have really stood out in your career?
The biggest news story I did was early on 2000 and I can't the years, can't remember which year it was, but it was the KP Peter Moores. That KP had written an email asking them to sack Peter Moores. That was at the end of that India tour in 2008, and of course it ended with them both being sacked. That's how the ECB reacted to that when I broke that story. And I remember Peterson landing at Heathrow because he'd been away in South Africa or something, and all these photographers were there. And I thought, well, I caused that. Um, Obviously, he caused it by sending an email, but getting hold of that was a big one. I think that I've sort of enjoyed doing a lot of interviews in recent years, and I particularly like doing them now. I remember did a feature in Rwanda. I remember on the South Africa tour, I'd heard about this cricket project in Rwanda, and I flew to Kigali from Joburg, and that was a big piece at the time. These guys telling me about their genocide stories and how cricket had helped get them through. That was a one that I always stick with. And I went back to Rwanda a couple of years later once they built the cricket ground there. And then in recent times, I mean, uh, the did an interview, a few interviews in the last couple of years with ex-players I've enjoyed doing. Um, One of the more difficult pieces I did last year was the interview with Josh Baker's parents. But it was something that was an opportunity for him to be remembered, to give his parents an opportunity to pay tribute to him and for them to talk to me. I was very grateful for that because it was very difficult. They hadn't done an interview at that stage, and that was hard for them, and I'm very grateful for Paul and Lisa for doing that. And let me tell their story. So that's probably the most recent, more recent ones. And yeah, it's difficult. I can't, not because I've had so many, but it's just so difficult to think of off the top of my head. Um, but yeah, those are the ones in recent times.
No,
Sid Lawrence, I interviewed Sid last year when he was diagnosed. There's a lot of yeah. I need to do some more cheerful stuff.
Well, hopefully there'd be some cheerful stuff with hopefully England lifting the urn and the background to that maybe.
Yeah, and the one thing that is, like I said earlier, the changes is that you've encouraged now to do more, you know, more off diary pieces, and probably we were back in the day, and that's good for your own development and keeping you fresh. Last India tour, I went to where Jaiswal's old coach, and found where he lived in these little shack he used to live in and by the Madan in Mumbai. Last New Zealand tour, I went to see McCullum's old where he grew up, his house, and it was a bit weird, but yeah. So these things you are able to do now, which probably weren't before because you were tied to the kind of daily agenda.
Yeah, no, of course. Okay, so what are your thoughts on the 100? It's a very divisive competition. I remember, you writing something. I'm just reading the headline. I know you, as a journalist, you don't write the headlines. I know that, but tone deaf ECB has broken Ben Stokes by prioritising the 100, and that was the announcement of the 500 million pounds, was it? What are your thoughts on that competition as a whole? Not well in terms of the way it's changed English cricket, but also the standard as well.
I think the cricket is crap. I really do. I know. I don't. I'm not a dinosaur. But I'm really not. I can understand why they wanted to bring in another a competition that they owned. I completely got the kind of the financial side of it, but I just don't like the 100 format. I just don't think the cricket's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm the
Uh,
same, Nick. I don't think it's an improvement on the T20 Blast.
no, I think T20s are great. I think it's an improvement on the Blast because, in the sense that you got the best against the best, you do have a better standard of player. You're just naturally going to have that with fewer teams. And next year, I think we will see it develop in that regard in the next few years because of the money that's being put behind it by the new owners. We'll see some serious salaries being offered, and you'll see the best players in the world playing with it. So I get the quality of it. I just don't like the format very much. How that money is divvied up and spent in the next few years is going to be fascinating to watch. English cricket has just had this massive windfall of money, but I don't really see, going forward, the Sky deal, when that's renegotiated in the next couple of years, is probably going to be flat. It's not going to go up because the broadcasters don't have the money anymore. That's why you're seeing BT, and not sending commentary teams to Australia because they haven't got the money. So that's going to remain relatively flat, and that's what a lot of the counties outside the test grounds rely on to get them through. So that's going to have a fallout. The schedule has been ruined by the 100, so that's still, I don't know the answer to that other than to cut the championship because they're not going to cut the not championship but cut more county cricket because there's no other way of doing it. They're not going to cut the 100. So and it's inevitable, I guess, at some point the ECB, if their income is flat broadcast wise in the next few years, then we're going to definitely see a push to sell two more teams because they'll need to raise a couple of £100 million. And, so you'll see one in the northeast and one in the west country. And if you're going to do that, then the 100 will have to expand. Obviously, there'll be more games with more teams. So it will expand. At the moment, I don't see it changing from the 100. I think that's locked in for the format, that is, for the time being, until they get to a point where they don't care whether they bastardise the blast anymore, which was the reason why we got the 100, because the counties didn't want a second T20 competition. I guess that's inevitably the 100 will become so dominant that they won't care about that anymore. So that might be that point where it does morph into a T20.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, just a final question, Nick. We've seen it seems to be the question that's asked every year now, or certainly every couple of years of the future of Test cricket. We keep hearing, so many suggestions. Two divisions, etc. It's been a question I don't think it's ever going to go away. Where do you see Test cricket going? Is Test cricket dying? Where do you see its future in it over the next sort of decade, I suppose?
I don't think Test cricket's dying outside of the big three, but there's big problems elsewhere. Test grounds will be full in England next summer. I mean, the tickets are already mostly gone, I think. But I guarantee the next tour, this time next year, I'll be getting ready to go to South Africa, hopefully. And outside the Cape Town Test at the beginning of maybe Boxing Day in Pretoria, there won't be many people there. And that is the problem. It's whether it's dying elsewhere in the world. West Indian Test cricket. I don't know where that's whether there's any hope really of revitalising that. I hope there is, but I don't know. So yeah, it's vibrant when the big three are playing each other. It's more of a challenge when they're not. And England, you can see that because the ECB have bumper years in the sort of odd numbered years. So 25 is a great year because they had the India series. 27 will be a great year because they got the Ashes. 29 will be a good year because they got India. Where they're struggling is those in between years, when the competition and the opposition are not quite as attractive, and not as commercially attractive. I mean, so that is the problem. And uh, two divisions are, why don't we give it a go? Do something different. I mean, if you do nothing, nothing will change.
Yeah, no, that's well, I don't think anyone knows the answer, and it'd be interesting to see what the ICC do, if anything, over the next sort of few years. All right, well, Nick, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Good luck. I'll say good luck. Well, enjoy. Hopefully, you enjoy the Ashes. Hopefully, it'd be an
I
England
don't have
win.
any luck. They
Yeah.
also, yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll be covering an England. Well, hopefully we'll win at least one Test match. I've won one since 2010-11, so Sydney in 2011. So hopefully you will be reporting on an Ashes series win down under for the first time in a while. So thanks again for your time. Thanks everyone for watching. Subscribe if you're new. Let us know your thoughts down below, and we'll catch you soon. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you. Cheers.